I was at Hallie's singing recital today, and she was wonderful, by the way. But I heard a young girl, like 6 years old, and she was singing Amazing Grace. And it hit me as I was listening to that, well, something that you're not going to be able to see right away, and you're not going to be able to believe. Amazing grace. The grace of God is not in the Old Testament. It's hinted at in God's original dealings with Abraham, but it's not in the rest of the Old Testament. It's not in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, other than a few examples, and it's not even mentioned as grace. But when Jesus deals with the Syrophoenician woman and the one other woman, neither one of them are Israelites. And Jesus does something for them because of their faith. Okay? But other than that, it's not in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. It's not in the first 8 chapters of Acts. It's not in 1st or 2nd Peter. It's not in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd John. It's not in James, and it's not in Revelation. It's not in any of those. So when you're singing about amazing grace, just understand, it's not in any of those places. Grace is in the message to Paul, the message from the risen Christ to Paul. And the risen Christ, or Paul references it as a secret message, a message that was hidden in God from the beginning of time. Because if the powers that be on the earth would have known this message, they would not have crucified Christ. The grace of God. Now, we're going to talk about that from the standpoint, and I'm going to explain why I teach what I teach and why so few people, the fewness of the people, would blow your mind who get it. Because, for example, you go to your church on Sunday, and it doesn't matter what church it is. It does not matter. And it does not matter whether your pastor preaches about grace sometimes, because they mix all of those things I just told you, the Old Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all of that, James, Peter, they mix it with the message to Paul and what Paul talks about. In another video I talked about they do this. They mix the messages. Can't mix the messages. God doesn't do mixtures. And this would help you very much if you understood that God is working through ages. Because the message now is not the message that was then. Okay? So we're working through ages. And in this age, the age since Jesus Christ was risen, and specifically after 70 AD, when God divorced Israel, the house of Judah, the remainder of the house of Israel, which was the house of Judah. He had already divorced the house of Israel before. The grace of God. There it is. It's Paul's message. But you and all of the people sitting in the pews with you and the guy standing up there all talk about the law, all of this, and Paul, the grace of God. It's okay that you talk about it, all the stuff, all the Old Testament, that's no big deal. Until you start saying that you're supposed to do this and mix that with the grace of God. It can't be mixed. If you're going to sing the song Amazing Grace, you need to quit talking about how we need to be doing all of these things. They don't mix. That's why Paul says it's either all by grace or none of it's by grace. You cannot mix all of these other books of the Bible and act like we're supposed to be doing those things now and also talk about grace. Can't be done. Well, it can be done, but it can't be done the way it's supposed to be done. Because God doesn't do mixtures. Okay? So, the grace of God. That's why I tell you, the message today, and the only message for today, is the transcendent grace of God, the finished work of Jesus Christ, the reconciliation of mankind to God, and the salvation of all. It's the only message for today. If you're doing these others, you are mixing them. And Paul says you're accursed. That's why I made that entire video on who are the believers. And that's why I say things like, there's not one thing you hear at church that's true. Not one. There's not anything that comes out of the pastor's mouth that is true. Why? Because he's mixing these things together. So he destroys grace when he's teaching this over here. Neither one is true when you do this. The grace of God, it's a standalone message made possible by the resurrection of Jesus Christ and taught by the risen Christ, the one who went to be seated at the Father's right hand, the risen Christ to the Apostle Paul. That's why you can't get it where you're trying to get it. And that's why I tell you, that the snatching away of the believers will be a group that is so small that it will blow your mind. And the people who do this, mix the messages, will not be in it. Again, they're going to be saved. Everybody's going to be saved. But understand this as well. If you're teaching that you have to do anything, doesn't matter what it is, anything, to be saved, you're not teaching Paul's message. You're not teaching the grace message. You're teaching another message that's not a gospel. That's what Paul says too. If you're teaching this other thing, it's not another gospel, because it's not a gospel. You know, and I can hear the argument, well, you know, Jesus, what you're telling us, not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those are in red. Jesus' words are in red. Jesus came to the Israelites because that was promised them. Now, Jesus and what he did, what he accomplished, did much more than that. But he came to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Solely. That's why he told the Syrophoenician woman, what are you asking me for? I can't give the children's food to the dogs. And then she said, yes, Master, but even the dogs can feed on the crumbs from the children's table. So he healed her daughter. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they're a gospel. They're not four gospels, they're one gospel. They're foretellings of the same gospel to the house, to the Israelites. And Jesus came, according to Paul in Romans, he came to fulfill the patriarchal promises. Now, the glorious thing, and this is what the risen Christ shared with Paul, the glorious thing is he did much more than just fulfill the patriarchal promises. And in this age, that's the message. Now, when this age is done, and this age will end with the tribulation, then the kingdom age will come. And all of that he taught in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all of that will be front and center again. And the people who have believed Paul's message of the things I mentioned, the transcendent grace of God, etc., they will not be here. And the law in the kingdom age will be able to be done because God will write it on their hearts. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to be done even then. So, Amazing Grace, the next time you hear that song sung, you think about this. And quit trying to mix that amazing grace with all of these other teachings of Christianity. You make it of no effect. Well, God's grace is always of effect, but you won't participate in that grace at this moment. I love you all.